Bonnie, do you? Okay, thank you. I call this November 14th meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, thank you. So moving on to, okay, so we'll do that change. Moving on to the minutes. Any questions, comments on the minutes? Oh, yeah, sorry. Do we have a motion to approve the modified agenda?
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? Thank you. So I'm assuming most of you are probably here for the first item for the grand trees. The applicant withdrew that, so that's not going to be coming before us. This did, it was 7. Yep. Right. So if they had not withdrawn it, there would have been a public hearing. We would have heard from all of you. We did get a lot of emails. I really appreciate the community involvement. That is awesome. That helps us a lot. This will probably be coming back in January. So keep an eye out for it. By all means, send emails again and please come. So you're welcome to stay for the whole meeting, but if that's why you're, I assume with the crowd, that's why you all were here. So I wanted to let you know that that's been, the applicant took it off. So appreciate your involvement and definitely come back when it comes back before us. There will be another notice for a public hearing when they want to come back. Okay, then on to the minutes. Were there any questions or concerns about the minutes?
I make a motion to accept them as submitted.
For both the meeting and the special called meeting?
Well, I was looking at the meeting specifically, but
Because we have minutes for both.
I was making a motion for the minutes specifically, not the special meeting.
Okay, do we have a second for the motion to accept the minutes for the
I'll second
planning
that.
commission? All in favor? Okay, then do we have a motion for the minutes for the special called meeting?
I make a motion to approve the minutes for the special call meeting.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Okay, and then on to item 2, the rezoning 22-41.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. This item here, case number 2241 from Mike McGill. This is to rezone on McGill Road at tax map number 15300000001. The request is to rezone an 8-acre portion of a 22-acre parcel from AGC to AGC1. The applicant's request is to remove the split zone status of the current parcel. The applicant has no plans at this moment to develop the property, but they wanted to go ahead and if they ever decide to recombine the lot, they would be able to take care of and get the zoning all into one district. The property is located off of McGill Road, just south of Black Highway. This is in the western part of York County. As you can see from this map here, I've highlighted the area where they're going to be rezoned, and that's the area that's currently AGC. The property is heavily wooded. It slopes towards the center. There is a creek behind it. It is vacant. As you can see from here, there is some significant topography on this piece of property as well as a creek behind it. The zoning for the area, the majority of the area is AGC. There is a swatch of AGC1 through the center of the property along McGill. Once again, you can see closer here to the area of the 8 acres that's being rezoned to AGC1. The comprehensive plan for the area here for the future land use map is agricultural, which is lined up with what they're requesting to do. Agricultural is for single family homes, but also has working farms, forestry, any kind of livestock in the AGC and AGC1 districts. Complementary uses include low-density residential neighborhoods or developments, as well as some agritourism. Staff is recommending approval for this request here. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map. The uses are very common in the area, and this will eliminate a dual or split zone status of the property. Any questions of staff?
I was just wondering, how did it get that way? Where did that come from?
There was these properties were recombined, and the larger one, AGC1, was rezoned. I think in your staff report it has the year, and they were thinking about at that time developing it. And then over time, there's been some lot splits and changes and recombines, and so that's where we're at now. So previously they could split the parcels even if they were zoned differently, but now they can't.
But really, with the AGC and AGC1, they can still only have one house and one accessory.
Well, the difference
parcel.
actually for AGC, you can have 2 homes on one lot, but you cannot have that in AGC1. So without any kind of conditions or restrictions from that second home. So with AGC1, you could have an ADU, accessory dwelling unit, but you couldn't get a separate second full-size home.
Right, yeah, just
Also
the
for
accessory dwelling unit. but-
Right, you limited to
yeah.
the ADU.
Well, you say develop it, it sounds like they're gonna put a bunch of houses, from AGC to AGC1, you don't get to,
Yeah, I think.
put anything
for this-
extra on
Yeah,
it.
exactly, yeah.
okay, hearing no further questions, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. Item 3, 22-42.
Case number 2242, the applicant is the York County Council. This is a countywide rezoning of 52 parcels to the Parks and Recreation District, which is a new zoning district. As I mentioned, it's 52 parcels. It's located in districts 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's currently used, properties that are in this list are currently used for either public or private recreation. Most of them are actually owned by York County, but there are 16 parcels in that list that include other owners. That would be Duke Energy, SCDNR, and Pine Tuck Holdings. And the purpose for that is, we established this new Park and Rec district, and that was to be able to establish appropriate use, dimensional, and development standards for property that is zoned, any kind of future improvements for the Park and Rec district. And then doing this rezoning will allow, if we ever had to rezone to something besides Park and Rec, this would allow some kind of public input to a different district, and then it will allow also staff to be able to, or planning commission and council, to reflect upon that and see whether rezoning is appropriate. I'm going to go through and give you some ideas of where these parcels are. Like I said, most of these things are owned by the county. On the western part of York County, we have parcels that are for Worth Mountain, the James Ross Wildlife Reservation, that's an SCDNR property, as well as the Kirsch Wildlife Conservation. These properties are used mostly for hunting, and same thing for McConnell's Tract. These are owned and operated by SCDNR. We have also some properties, as you're probably aware of, is Brattonsville, and those are also requesting for rezoning to PR, and the Draper Worth Mountain Project, which is right across from Brattonsville. We also have in southeastern York County, and that concludes the Catawba Bend Preserve, Blackjack Heritage Preserve, also a DNR property, and Pine Tuck Golf Course. In the lower Lake Wiley area, properties were including Nanny's Mountain, Allison Creek Access, that's a Duke Energy property, as well as Ebenezer Park, also a Duke Energy. Then we've leased it from them for our Park and Rec purposes. And then what I call the upper Lake Wiley area. This would include Buster Boyd Bridge access, the Woodland Farm, which is a new property acquired by the Bethel Lake Wiley Park and Preservation Group. Paddler's Cove is a piece of property that's a kind of remnant from that development. We have our, it's a vacant land next to the pump station. And then Field Day Park, our county park over there, as well as 2 parcels on the south part of that, which is Naked Goat, also acquired by the Preservation Group, as well as the property just to the west of that. There are some properties there that we don't know how we're gonna use those, but those are also acquired by the Preservation Group. So like I mentioned, total of 52 properties, 16 of them not owned by the county, and rezoning these 2 PR would be able to establish them as a Park and Rec district, zoning district. Any questions of staff?
I do have one question.
Sure.
I I understand why all the properties were included, and, specifically Pine Tuck. How come River Hills wasn't included? Because that's also a golf course that's within the unincorporated area.
It is, and to be honest with you, staff talked about that today, and we felt the conditions were slightly different for River Hills, but I can't prepare to answer that question exactly what those conditions were. But when staff discussed River Hills, comparing that to Pine Tuck, it may have been, it was part of a gated community, may have been the reason, a little different status than we have for Pine Tuck.
And I can add to that where the code does allow for a golf course as a neighborhood amenity as an allowed use, but it does not allow a golf course, just a private golf course, as an allowed use in a residential zoning district. So we're going to have to do a little bit of digging to see if there are any deed restrictions or the like that are on that River Hills golf course to determine if it should be added to this list or not, but we'll work on that.
That's,
All right, so I have a follow-up question to that then. So the Pine Tuck Golf Course, there is a Pine Tuck neighborhood. So that's not considered an amenity of that neighborhood and wouldn't just be a conditional use under how it's zoned down? Because there's Pine Tuck Golf Course, but there's a Pine Tuck neighborhood that is right at the golf course.
Yeah, I don't believe they were developed together like that for that purpose of being, I think they just happened to be a neighborhood next to the golf course. I don't think they were like River Hills or Regent Park where that was all developed around that.
Okay, but.
We'll have to find out more information
Yeah,
about
be
that.
that as it may, though, it can certainly fall under the amenity of a golf course in the way it's zoned today if it's considered part of that neighborhood, right?
If it's considered part of that neighborhood and was established as, if we determine that's the case, then yes. But if we determine it's not the case, then no.
Yeah, essentially, it would have to have been included in the preliminary plat for a subdivision neighborhood. If it's not, then it would not be considered a neighborhood amenity.
I see. Well, okay.
One of the questions I have written down is, do we know when the houses were put in with respect to the golf course? I mean, I read that the golf course opened in '68.
Yeah, I don't know when the homes were built, but like Jonathan was saying, if the preliminary plat included that as an amenity for the home, then that would be different if it was just happened to be a homes near a golf course. And so we can find that out. We'll do some research on that one to make sure.
was there a procedure in 68 for plating? I know the zoning code was not implemented until 80.
Right. I feel like there were probably some plating standards. I don't know what they were at that time, but there had to have been a way, whether it was handled entirely by the courts or there was some county government that, at the time that followed some rules of subdivision, but I don't know the exact answer for you there. But we should be able to find any plats of record. Those are all at the courthouse.
So Diane, I know the county is the applicant. Normally we ask questions to the applicant. If the owner of that property was here, because it sounds like some of those questions might go to the owner, could they ask that?
It's your judgment to ask that question if you'd like to answer that.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I know it's not a public hearing, so,
Yeah, yeah,
and
sure,
it's usually
appreciate
the
that.
applicant
Yeah,
who we get to
yeah.
come up and speak, but since it's the county's
This
the
person-
applicant, but,
Right.
so is the owner of that property here today? The owner's, okay, so if you had a question of the owner, you're welcome to ask them to come up and ask those questions. I don't know if you want to, but just.
Yeah, I do have a question. I'm curious if you have any of this history about golf course versus the houses, and then also, what is the, any future different plans for what the golf course will be?
Okay, sir, if you could step up to the mic and state your name and address for the record.
Craig Craze, 3480 Marshall Road, Rock Hill, South Carolina. I am the owner of Pine Tuck Holdings, and I'm not prepared to answer all those questions, but I'd have to say that I think everyone that lives along that golf course would certainly think that that golf course is an amenity to their property. And considering that those lots were laid out over a series of time dating back, I think the earliest drawing I have is probably in the 70s. And recognize that we didn't have a lot of digital things. I don't know that, I think it'd be difficult to say that the homes were built there just coincidentally beside a golf course. I mean, the homes were intentionally, if you go out down there, I mean, I don't have anything other than common sense as you drive down there and you look at it and like the homes back up to golf courses, right? So it seems like they would go together as a package.
So, just to understand your position, you're opposed to the county's application to rezone your area to parks and recs. What's your position on what's being proposed here tonight, what the county is asking us to do?
So I would like the land to remain under its current zoning, which is the RSF 40. If you look at all the land that's together, it's approximately 400 acres. It's, that is all uniformly zoned. This rezoning would result in a fragmentation of the property that would turn it into a jigsaw puzzle, which means you really can't do anything with the other property that is not rezoned.
Are there any further questions of the
I
of the
do,
applicant,
one more
the owner?
question. Certainly, I don't know why the people, I assume some of the audience members here also live on Pantuck. Have you had an opportunity to speak to some of the other houses that are adjacent to the golf course? And what's the general position of the people who live out in the community?
So I know my neighbors there very well. And so I think everyone is under the understanding that golf as an industry is in decline. And to be clear, I became the owner of the land to prevent the golf course from going into foreclosure and from it becoming a field of weeds. I bought the land and then I leased it back to the golf course for $1 a year. And I said, I don't have a plan right now exactly, but we know it does, we don't want it to become something bad. And so the long-term plan is not for golf there, just simply because the golf industry is in decline. So it needs to be redeveloped to something other than traditional track homes. I live out there. I want something great to be in my neighborhood, in that area, and that's the reason I made the investment.
Perfect, thank you.
Are there any further questions of the owner?
Actually, it's a question for Diane. So in that.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry. So the minimum then lot requirement is an acre?
Currently, it's a RSF 40,
40?
so it's 40,000
So it's
square feet, which is
40,000.
under an acre. If I can add two more things too to this application or the request here is, as it's currently zoned, the golf course is a non-conforming use. So in RSF 30, it's 30, you cannot do a golf course as a use. So therefore, I mean, I don't think the intention is to expand, but he cannot if he chose to actually add something to it. And also, the purpose for the PR district, when we did recode, was to be able to identify areas that are park and rec, and part of this came on the heels of Region Park, and is to be able to zone it to PR so that there couldn't be somebody putting in homes there as it is right now. People living there have the intention that is a golf course. That's what they live there next to, is a golf course. If the applicant chooses to do something else, they could come back and rezone the property to whatever that would happen to be. I mean, he mentioned he's not going to make it a golf course forever, so this opportunity was to give the community and the council and planning commission the opportunity to reflect on whatever that other thing might be.
But Diane, maybe I'm just missing something. This is a private landowner who bought land that's zoned a particular way, and the government is coming in saying, I want to rezone your property, and then we're gonna decide what can go on that property. Am I missing something
We're
there?
rezoning it to what it's actually used for. So we're making the zoning match the use. So it's a golf course, and therefore it needs to be zoned where golf courses are allowed.
But currently, right now, is not being used for golf.
Yes, it is. It is an active open golf course. Yes, sir.
But it's non-conforming, because the golf course was
It's
legally there.
non-conforming, so therefore they
But I
couldn't
mean, I see a
expand
lot
it.
of parallels with the UD project we did, and we had a real problem with saying you can just come in and change people's zoning. You needed to get permission from the property owners to do it. I see a parallel with this.
Sure.
I would hate to see what happened at Regent Park happen, but a lot of the problem with Regent Park was they put in 3-story townhomes on top of what used to be beautiful, you know, $750,000 golf course homes
Right.
that now, you know, this is little less than an acre.
You wouldn't be able to
I
do
feel
that
what you're
in our.
saying. with
Yeah,
that. And with the UD project,
Sure, the scale is a little different.
it's
I agree.
different, but,
Yes.
but our major problem with that was, no, you need to have meetings, you need to talk to the owners. and get their input on what it would be rezoned to.
Well, the difference for the UD was you're going from UD to some other district. And
Right.
so let's figure out what's the best district for you. This is going to PR. So it wasn't as though the conversation was more about, what are you doing with your property now? What do you think you might be doing? And going that route and go forward. It's a little different, but that's similar.
And then maybe you're not in a position to answer this question, but, and I don't play golf out there, obviously, I didn't even know they were still using it. I remember the conversation about Pine Tuck generally from the community. But when this property was in foreclosure and this gentleman spent his private money to get it out of foreclosure, if the government was that concerned about the zone, why didn't the government just buy the property?
I don't know the answer to that
Okay,
question. You know
all
that.
right.
Yeah.
All right, well,
Fair
I
enough.
mean, in all fairness, I mean, I'll just say there's no way I can support the government coming in, taking someone's property and rezoning it. I mean, I think my position has just been consistent on that.
Yes, sir.
So could we make a motion to approve this, removing that one piece, request that staff, the property owner, and the community
So-
have a meeting so they can all come back?
So the way this works is that the county council is the applicant. And so therefore, you cannot remove a piece of property from the list, nor can staff. But what you can do in your motion to say that I don't recommend these two parcels to be included in the list, and that becomes council's decision whether they want to go forward or remove it. So it would not be one where we would get together with that. It's a council decision whether they want to move forward.
But we can make a motion requesting these two parcels be removed from
Not
this
be included
list,
in that list. Yes, ma'am.
but approve the rest of
Yes,
the list.
absolutely.
Okay.
Then I will make that exact motion.
And I will second it.
Do we have any further discussion?
The only discussion I have is just highly encourage the people who live in these districts that elect these county council members to blow up their emails, their phones, whatever else you have as a private landowner.
I have one question. So council just gave you this list of properties and no,
No, we provided the list to council, but they reviewed the list. So they're not gonna know what the properties are zoned or how they're used. That's the staff responsibility to do that. So we did the research for that. We identified the properties, provided council with the list, and they approved the list.
okay. And according, in the future, River Hills could possibly be coming back to this.
Yeah, and I'll add that, when the Parks and Recreation District was created, it's new to Recode. It came out of some of the public input that we had and some of the desires of county council that they did not want to repeat of the Regent Park townhome situation. So we had the parameters with which we knew that council wanted to operate in terms of applying a Parks and Recreation District. And so everything on this list meets those parameters. And of course, it's council's prerogative to add or remove items to the list. But this is what that conversation entailed. And to the extent that River Hills needs to be added, we will definitely take a look at that and reference that to council as well.
Pine Tuck Holdings,
The two that are owned by Pine Tuck Holdings?
too.
Yes. And I can, if you give me just a moment, do you need those parcel ID numbers?
614-0000-014 and 614-0000-037.
So can you read the motion back to us real quick? Perfect, okay. Thank you. Did we have any further discussion?
I just have a clarification from Diane. So moving forward, if the developer decides tomorrow that he'd like to revoke that lease from the golf course, he's already zoned for those lots. As long as he came in with a preliminary plat, there would be nothing that the neighbors could do.
That's
It
correct.
could be a repeat of Regent Park,
It
right?
could very well, at a lower scale, but it could be a
Yeah.
Region Park.
Correct.
And I have to admit, that is a concern. I am completely on board, unfortunately, with the idea that, it is private property and it is zoned this way, but it does concern me that that could happen. So I wish there were a way that we could somehow provide additional buffer for existing homes. I know that that's not really a possibility, but, I mean,
The
There-
only pushback that I have with that is, that these are the people, you and I, we live way over in Fort Mill,
oh, I know.
you know, but these people who live there in Pontotoc, they understand the ramifications. If this is not rezoned, they could have tract homes. This private individual who's bought these homes could build tract homes there
I say, I hope they
tomorrow.
understand that, because I
they
know
understand that.
people in Regent Park who lost, you know, a significant amount of value in their home when the golf course behind it was developed. You know, when you buy
Acre
into.
lots are a lot different than
It is, yeah,
high-rise
it's,
townhomes.
right.
That
I
it
wanted
is
to
a-
make that clear, yeah.
It is a different, and yeah, I would hate to see something like that happen
But
there.
residential to residential, there's no specific,
Right.
you know, buffer. I mean, once you come in, yeah, you're gonna have setbacks, but
Right.
you're not necessarily gonna have like an extra acre of buffer between an established home and something that new that comes in. I mean, I think as a developer, that would be a nice thing to do, if you
Right.
come in and you know, change what people expect. But, you
Well,
know,
and that's why I recommended the owner, staff, and the residents get together, meet, discuss what could be going there.
Yes.
And then if they want to come back for a different zoning, or to put this in after they understand the ramifications.
Right.
But
But
I think they need to have that meeting before we make a decision.
absolutely. And I do understand that golf is on the decline across the United States. You know, that just happens. But, you know, I do think it's unfortunate sometimes that folks end up in a position that they didn't ever think they would be in. So,
And I do golf out there, and I love it because it's so quiet, but that's why
No, I
it's
know.
not doing well, because it's so quiet.
but I do agree, it's public or private property, so it's different.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you.
Ms. Bonnie,
Oh, she's bringing Greg. Oh, she got
do you
Greg.
have any water before we go to the next? Do you have any water,
Yeah.
ma'am?
Can we take a 5-minute break so he can go grab? I think I have some dollar bills, and there's a vending machine right out here. If you, do you have any change or dollars? Okay, yeah. Okay, we're back on then. That's why I always bring something with me. I do the same thing. It is dry and cold.
It's freezing cold. I'm gonna go to the men's room.
And for those of you who are here for the Pine Tuck rezoning, if you want to stay, of course, you're welcome to do so. If you want to leave, you're not going to offend anybody, so. Well, a couple of them were. Yeah. Okay, on to the next item, the 5-year plan.
This is for the comprehensive plan update for the resolution of the recommendation to council. As you can remember, in October, we got together and I gave you an overview of the process. We discussed the plan for the new document and gave you highlights what was in the document itself. I reviewed the future land use map changes, kind of gave you an overview of what we were changing and what we were thinking behind the changes. At that meeting, the Planning Commission voted to defer the item. And with the request, they wanted to get an overview of the changes that were of the document. They want to get a comparison of what was in 2016 and what is in 2022 to get an idea how things have changed. And their second request from Planning Commission was also to get a summary of the comments that were received during the open house sessions. And so with this agenda app or package, I included a statement, an overview of those things. So I provided you a point-by-point highlights. I didn't go, red line one to the other, but gave you an idea as to what was changed in each of the individual elements. And then I also provided you with an overview of the open house sessions that we had. And then in that package also was a table that showed the comments that we received from all the different people that showed up at that meeting, to give you an idea as to how, sure, we received a lot of comments, but there was no movement. There was no mandate to be able to make any changes to our comprehensive plan, which is why we didn't do that. And so we've presented the information to you. I've given you information as well, and I'm basically here to have any questions if you want to go over what I supplied or what I referred to you guys.
Okay, so first, I was the one that requested a lot of this information, and I greatly appreciate you all taking the time to go in a little bit deeper and provide this, as well as the answer to the several page question thing. Yes, ma'am. And again, for everyone who may not know, I am a newbie on the Planning Commission, and I understand that this is a big deal, and I guess I didn't in the beginning understand just how a big deal it was. And after I realized how much this plays a part, I thought comprehensive plan is more, this is kind of how we'd want it to look, more than it really being, this is what we expect is going to happen. And so as I read through all 136 pages, it was me trying to digest and see, how does this fit with that, and this priority that might conflict with that. So I do greatly appreciate you all taking the time, because I know it was extra effort to help clarify those things and answer my questions and provide the feedback to me. And I think the community portion of this was really important. When you gave us that summary, that red dot, blue dot summary, right? I guess that's what we're calling it.
It works.
I kind of scanned through that, and I came up with some common themes that I saw from the folks, and that one is protect the scenic rural landscapes and open spaces of York County. When you look at that as a percentage of the total responses in that category, that was 47% of the responses in that category. Preserve and protect the county's natural resources from potential adverse impacts, 62%. Reduce the impact of stormwater hazards, about 49%. Create a high quality of life in order to attract a good workforce, 36%. Preserve and protect existing residential neighborhoods in rural areas, 53%. And then promote development that enhances local character and preserves rural character in areas beyond the urban services boundary. That was 68%. That was the highest of any of the ones that I looked at. And so the message that I got from the community in looking at that is, we don't have a problem with development, but preserving the character that we have today and the rural nature of a lot of the county is very important to us. And each one of us is in a different section demographic of the county, and the needs that there are in Fort Mill and Tegakay are different than the needs that are down in District 5 in Catawba, or further out in District in Aubrey, I think, right? Further out, right? Hickory Grove. I'm sorry, Aubrey. I'm sorry. Zips out. So I had the name right, and I looked left instead of right. I'm so sorry, Aubrey. But so our job as a group is to try and see, okay, well, how does all this fit together, and how do we keep the progress that we've made moving in the right direction while still respecting the unique needs of each group that we have up here. And I think, again, all the effort you put into answering my questions has really helped me understand this. I still have some more, and they're more along the lines of me just helping to understand when we have you. I think you saw several times I asked questions about, well, when this conflicts with this, how do we work it out? And I'm still sometimes unclear as a group when we have something come before us that seems to have competing goals that are both not necessarily bad goals, they're both good goals, but they compete. How do we decide which one we should be recommending? And that's where a lot of that came from. But after looking through all of that and reading your responses, I think the comprehensive plan overall is ready to be updated and move forward, but I still have a problem with one part of the future land use map. And that is that we are changing some designation down in the Catawba area from employment center to ID. And I understand that we have some properties in that area that by right now are zoned ID. But there's other property included in that right now is not zoned ID. And I think to honor this and the feedback we got from the community, I can in good conscience support that. I think that we should be looking to do that as employment center and maybe some of the RI that you mentioned to me, rural industrial, that might be a little bit more applicable for that neck of the woods. And that the other section be left as it is for residential. Now, I know we don't have applicants, we don't have a public hearing, but I have received a lot of concern from folks in the area about that particular change in the future land use map. And I suspect a lot of the people that you see sitting here are part of that, but just to be clear, if we have folks here that are concerned about that section of the future land use map changing, would you just please raise your hand? Okay. So, and please go ahead.
And I will add, on a personal note, I married a lady who's from Rock Hill, and she grew up in the Catawba community. Her great-grandmother lives over off of Harmony Hill, and her sister just called what we define it as a ranch. It's only a couple of acres. It's down on Old Simpson. If you go down Old Simpson, she lives in the horse ranch there. That's my wife's identical twin. And I will tell you, she has well educated me about the Catawba community and the land that's down there. So, and I know Mike and I, quite frankly, have had a conversation, and she is also very concerned, and all of my family is concerned, and they are members of Tabernacle AME Zion Church, which is where we met down off of Old Friendship Road. I see some head shaking, and so I was down there this weekend, and the church members down there also expressed a lot of concern. And then today at my law office, I also had some of my former clients who owned the septic company down there. They came and paid a visit to my law office today and spent an hour with me educating me about that area of the county and their concern with the rezoning. So I will want to tell you that this one is a bit personal for me and a bit personal for my clients, and obviously I didn't know this crowd would show up, but there are people in the Catawba community who absolutely are concerned with some of the rezoning in the comprehensive plan. So I do concur with what you're saying. I know this is the area where you live, but it is also the area where my wife was born, where she grew up, where her family still is, and they are absolutely adamantly opposed to some pieces of this. And I know I cannot return to Thanksgiving dinner or to any family reunion if we don't have a full discussion here, and at least some parts of this are not addressed with rezoning some areas out there. So for what it's worth, in its current state, I certainly could not support it now that I've been educated on it. And hopefully we can have, hopefully anyway. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so first, it's not a rezoning, which is a good thing.
Correct.
Because it's not, which is good. It's the kind of the guiding. So if you're going to, right. So if we were going to make a motion to approve it, but keep this portion, do you have that section that we can specifically identify in a motion so that council knows exactly what the concerns are?
If I may, just to kind of help everybody else out, because I think some folks are aware of the area and some folks may not be. And so if you'll turn to the comprehensive plan on page 13, where you'll see the future land use map. And I think, Mike, you can share if you need to. And so there's a section, you might be familiar with, down at the bottom southeastern corner of the county. You'll see some purple areas there. That largest purple area is actually in New Indy. But just to the west of that, there's a strip of dark purple. And that's along the CSX rail line through that area there, and some parcels right around there. There's a current steel plant. And the majority of those parcels are currently zoned ID. The current comprehensive plan has those parcels as being employment center, which more aligns with the zoning districts of LI. And so staff would make the recommendation to change those to industrial, which better aligns with how they're currently zoned. Mike is correct. There are a couple of parcels within that area that's currently zoned, or currently, a future land designation of light industry, of employment center. There's probably 2, maybe 3 at the most, of parcels that I believe one might be RDD, one might be RSF 30 or 40. And they are towards the eastern side of that strip that's in there. And the reason that they were in 2016 and carried forward now as that designation is it would kind of continue that development as it currently is to allow for some possibly growth up to, I believe, a road intersection there. It was word, transition back to something else. So if somebody was to come in to rezone those couple of parcels, that we would support that by the comprehensive plan. All the other parcels in there are currently zoned ID. And the comprehensive plan is just aligning those two with how they're currently zoned to what the recommendation would be for the comprehensive plan.
I think the concern is exactly what you just said, to help encourage the growth of that ID out
For a
that way,
couple of
which I think
parcels.
is what
Sure.
why they don't want those included.
So if you could focus on just those couple of parcels that are not, just kind of help you get to where you might be for your motion to clarify that, the ones that are not zoned ID, maybe to remove those from that designation.
So, Diane, I don't want to get into speculating because certainly I don't know. And again, I got an education on all this over the weekend and the last couple of days. But I think we know, or those of us who've been around, and I was reminded of kind of the big elephant in the room and why, these community members out there are so adamant to prevent this rezoning. And again, I don't think it's my place to have that conversation because I'm not the most knowledgeable one about it, but there's just strong opposition to that rail line and what would happen at the rail line, and if this is rezoned to ID, what that rail line would provide and the opportunities it would provide for some companies to put things out there. And so, again, I'm going to leave it there, but I think you understand what that big
I do. I
elephant
just want
is.
to make sure we clarify for folks in the audience as well, the difference between a rezoning and a comprehensive plan. We are not rezoning anything. The majority of the property already is zoned ID.
Correct.
And so if somebody was to then look at the plan, if we took all that away, they might think that, well, this is going to become something it's not. It's ID. But there are some parcels that we gather, that's the truth, that are not zoned ID.
And Diane, to go a little further, there's some parcels right now that are zoned ID that are not being used as ID. I mean, one of the big sections in here is part of a farm that's RSF 40, and the section next to it is ID, but it's all being used as one continuous farmland.
But the
Cattle.
property owner might have purchased that property with the intention that maybe someday
I
my
totally
property rights
understand.
are ID.
And what I'm saying is, I don't have a problem if it's already zoned that way, keeping it that way, but I don't think that we should be expanding the
It's not a rezoning.
guidance that we want more of that along that area that's not already zoned that way. I
So
think is
perhaps
the
you
way
can
we
limit
want to say
your
that.
recommendation to not switch those ones that are that are not already ID, to remove those and make those rural residential.
Okay, if you can help me with how I would structure saying that, because I think that's exactly what I want to say, but, okay.
Let me ask one more question to make sure that I understand. Certainly, I know this is not a rezoning, but oftentimes when things come before this body in asking for rezoning, the recommendation to approve or not approve often consists of, it is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And so that's what my concern is, if we were to change this, and then the owners of this large tract out here, 300+ acres, that's down off of Highway 21, that's the big elephant in the room, if the owners of that tract of land were to come, then the recommendation would be to approve or disapprove based on whether or not it's consistent with the
The owners
comprehensive
would never
plan.
come to you. They're already zoned ID.
No.
Except
For some
ones,
of the
like I
other
said,
properties.
Except for the ones that are currently zoned,
Correct,
not ID.
correct.
Remove those.
Correct.
But the big elephant is already ID.
Yeah.
Correct,
You will
yeah.
never see that person.
No, I think the clarification here, and there's some confusion back and forth in the semantics that we're using, but I think that swath of purple right now collects some properties that are not zoned ID, and that's where the concern comes. And so
Sure.
if you can help me structure, how do we make that motion that we want to allow that to be designated that way in the future land use map, because those properties are zoned that way,
Right.
but to not include properties that are not currently zoned that way.
Sure,
Is
so
that-
you would make that recommendation that staff would amend the comprehensive future land use map to remove those parcels that are not zoned ID from that future designation of being industrial, that are along that area. And we can make that in your motion. It'll then go to county council as it is, and they will then consider it as well.
Correct. I understand we're not the final word, but I
Sure.
want to, that's
But
the
you can-
recommendation I'd like to make.
Right.
If it's zoned employment center right now, it would stay employment center?
It would,
Or
we're
if it was
recommending to,
if it was designated employment center in the future land use map?
that's
would
a
it-
good question. Would you rather to go employment center, or would you rather to go to rural residential as it's currently zoned RUD, or? it's up to
And
you.
not to further complicate it, but the employment center designation has been bifurcated, so that's no longer a future land use designation.
Good
So it would
point.
have to be either artisan employment or regional employment center, and this is not a center, so it would be that regional
It would have
employment.
to go to artisan, I would think. I
Artisan.
think regional is meant more for
Yeah,
like.
I'm sorry, you're right, yeah,
it'd have to go to
artisan.
Artisan, because you're right. It's no longer an employment center designation. We've removed that. It's artisan, so it'd have to go to that designation.
So
Which
if I,
would equate
if I
to, you're
might,
thinking about LIs or RI.
That's right. Yeah.
so if I might suggest, it sounds like you're moving towards leaving the properties that are already zoned industrial to have the future land use designation changed to industrial to reflect the existing zoning, and no other properties that are zoned any other district. And then all of the other properties that are in this draft in that area proposed to be industrial to go to rural residential.
Yes, rural residential, that's
And I
right.
think if you want to reference just those major cross streets, that would be enough to capture an emotion to convey that succinctly to
Hall
council.
Spencer and,
Along Hall Spencer and Highway 21.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, so to complicate things more, you said quite a few of those are not developed as industrial, even though they're zoned industrial?
That's correct.
So do you still want those to show future land use? So if somebody came in and said, okay, I bought this piece of land that's zoned industrial but not used as industrial, I'd like to rezone it.
Would I personally, would a lot of the
Well, you're
people
making-
want to
you're making the
rezone it?
motion.
Right, yeah.
So do you want to make the motion to encompass the whole thing, even though some of it's already zoned? It's not going to change the zoning, and if they want to develop industrial, it's zoned industrial, they still can. But if somebody were to buy it,
Oh, I see. So you're saying
it's
you would
not
just
developed
leave it
right.
all that way as what the future land use map is, and if it's already that way and somebody buys it, they can use it
they
that
can
way
use it
because
that
it's
way,
zoned
'cause
that
it's
way.
zoned that way, you're not changing it. But if they wanted to change it, if it's not being used as industrial, but they want to expand the farm and they want to buy that land, then it would
Okay.
be more, then the land use would say, yes, let them rezone it.
So then
Rural.
the motion is to just have all of that designated as rural. Is that what you're, I understand, but I'm saying that's the point that you're making. Okay.
I have a question for a couple of my members here. The previous matter, there was talk about the county coming in and rezoning private property, not at their request, and we're doing that by doing this. I don't understand, I can't see.
You're not
what the difference-
rezoning anything. There's
But
still,
we're still recommending it going against what is already there.
Let me, let me ask a question, Matt. So if we have the overlay and it's rural, but we have an industrial piece of property that doesn't require rezoning, it's already set as industrial, then they could do and use it as an industrial use without having to come through us. So we haven't technically changed the zoning, but what we've sent is a clear signal of what we'd like to see happen there. So we haven't taken any rights from anybody who has it zoned a particular way and saying we are now going to zone it this way, but we've said our outlook for that area, we'd like to see this go to residential. And you bought the property, it's ID, you can't build any houses on it. But if you want to, we've kind of set the future goal that there would be more rural residential housing there. So as you come to us to rezone it of your own accord to a residential use, we'd be more apt to approve it. I think I articulated all that correct, but I'm
The way I see this is somebody purchased the property it may be zoned RUD, but the comp plan talked about an employment center, and now we're taking away that from them.
Well, I don't know how long the properties have been in this place, but I don't know that there's any property that's changed hand recently within the last 5 years through there that someone would have had an expectation. And if they did, I don't know why in the last 5 years they wouldn't have taken some action to try and move on that. Right?
That's their decision whether they take action or not. I mean, you're dictating something to.
No, what I'm saying,
dictating
Matt,
something
is
to a private property.
no, sir. What I'm saying is, if I'm understanding your point, if someone had purchased the property because it was in an employment center future land use designation and had the intentions of doing something with it, I wouldn't think that the purchase would be that far away from the intention. Now, maybe I'm completely out in left field there, but normally I don't spend money on something until I'm ready to start moving towards what I'm going to do with it, right? But it takes all kinds. So that's where my disconnect was in what you said. But I could understand someone buying that and thinking 10 years down the road they might do something with it. I don't know. That is a good point.
and the 5-year update, I mean, that's kind of what the whole thing is. Okay, we're gonna change what we saw this area going industrial, we're gonna change it to, so, I mean, that's kind of what
Listen,
the whole plan, all the changes are.
I understand if we're going from employment center, industrial, or some other, whether it's artisanal, or so, I understand if there's that kind of change, that's an update. But to go from employment center to rural, that's a major change. That's a major, major change, and that's equivalent to what we just discussed previously.
And Matt, I actually do agree with you, and I don't think that should be the role of government to be in that at all in private landowners in their business. So my suggestion is, or what my recommendation was, obviously, is just to leave it as it is. And as people are moving out there and buying, they know what this is. They know where the different properties are. And not add the ID that the county is attempting to add. That's what I have a problem with. The areas that are zoned ID.
That I understand. But,
Okay, all right.
But there's been talk about moving that to.
I haven't had that talk. That wasn't my talk. So let's make it clear. That was Mike's position. That's not my position.
So do we have a motion?
All right,
I think we had one, didn't we?
Yeah, I don't think
We haven't, he was asking how to make a motion, he hadn't actually made a motion.
All right, so I think I want to make a motion that we change the future land use designation for the area of Hall Spencer Road and around Highway 21 so that any properties that are not currently zoned ID are not identified in that overlay as moving towards ID. I think, and I'm not sure if I'm saying this right or not, but that's what I've understood that is that right?
That's appropriate.
Okay.
So just to further clarify, you're almost there. You would need to designate which future land use designations for the two options. So you're talking about how the future land use designation should be for properties that are zoned ID, and your options there would be either artisan employment or industrial based on the conversation that you all have had so far. And then you would need to identify the other land use designation for those other properties, which I take it to be rural residential.
And Jonathan, well
artisan.
said, and I think that's exactly what I want to do, to designate them as artisan for what's already RD, and the remainder to remain rural. That's not already zoned ID.
So ID stays ID and the rest stays rural.
Unless it was already identified as being an employment center, in which case it becomes artisan.
Artisanal? Would you agree to that? If it was employment center going to artisanal?
Regardless of what it's currently zoned?
Yes, and when you say artisanal, I think that in the current future land use map, all of that property pretty much exists west of 21, with the exception of a small little piece that is up there at the intersection of 21 and the railroad. That's currently ID, but everything else out there, this patchwork that's there, would remain. Is that right?
Would remain
Yeah, this
Artisan?
is really hard to
So-
articulate how we say this.
So let me, I want to understand this, so I'm going to ask this as plainly as possible. The CSX property that's zoned RUD, what do you want to see that as?
It would remain RUD.
What is it?
You would,
What is
It would remain RUD.
what would you want to see it in the future land use plan? It is
RUD.
employment- It is employment center, okay, so it's zoned RUD.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That piece of property was not included in the employment center designation in the current future land use map, but it was in the new land use map. That's part of the issue. Was,
Leave that as rural.
yes.
That's what I needed to hear. Okay,
That's the concern.
that's it, that's all I needed to hear.
RUD, yep, gotcha.
I can completely understand that concern, and I'm on board with where this is going, but I also just mentioned that that intersection of a railroad is unique and lends itself to industrial and other large employment centers, and you don't find that very often, with rail lines going, so there are certain, large employers who are looking for lots like
There is some truth to that, but there is other property in the county near rail lines that's vacant,
I'm just
that-
saying,
that
I'm
has-
just playing devil's advocate here,
right?
so.
Yeah, I understand. But there's property that's right next to a rail line with a brand-new interchange just built that would fit something like that very, very nicely.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just a point of order. I think I heard a motion. I'm not sure that I've heard a second.
He hasn't finished the motion.
Trying to get the motion
He was
organized.
trying to say what we want to see on the property. Leave
So,
the
all right.
ID, and then he was trying to, so the motion hadn't quite finished.
So are you
Almost there.
feeling my pain and how complex this is to get articulated, I guess, a little
Absolutely.
bit? Yes, ma'am, okay. So, Jonathan, I'm gonna try again. So it would be a motion to modify the future land use map, to approve the plan with a modification to the future land use map in the area of Hall Spencer Road and Anderson Road, such that properties that are currently designated as employment center on the future land use map, but are zoned as ID, would become artisan. Is that right? Am I saying that
No,
correctly?
industrial. Industrial.
Industrial.
If they're
Which-
zoned ID, it'd be industrial.
No, but I mean, as far as the future land use map, it would be an artisan designation. See, this is why it's so hard.
No, the intention was to go to industrial. The current map here is showing it to go to industrial. That's, if it's zoned ID, is to go industrial on the future land use. But that's what the thought you were going towards.
Okay,
And if it wasn't zoned ID, then it would go to RUD.
So I think. Right, so Mike, I think you want to leave there's a property that's zoned industrial, future land use is industrial. The current land use that says employment center, go to artisan employment center, and the current land use that says rural residential, leave it as rural residential.
thank you very much. That's what I'm trying to say, I think.
That wasn't quite right because you said it's zoned. It's zoned.
not zoned, it's-
RUD, it needs to go to rural residential unless it was already artisan or employment center, in which case it would be artisan.
Sorry about that.
I think that's
Employment
it.
center would go artisan.
If it's not zoned
ID.
ID.
Right, so you would essentially have 3 future land use designations in and around Hall, Spencer, and 21. So the properties that are currently zoned ID would be shown with the future land use designation as industrial. The properties that are currently shown as employment future land use and are not zoned industrial would be artisan employment, and then everything else would be rural residential.
I think that's got it.
So say that's your motion.
That's my motion.
Okay.
Any further discussion? I'm sorry, do we have a second? We didn't get a second. Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. Whew, we got there. Any comments on the tracking sheet? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Make motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? We are adjourned.
I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I am so sorry.